to go.
All in, okay, it's 6:54, and we will call our regular session meeting to order, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope everyone had a great summer, and it's the first week back to school, which is every parent's favorite week, I think, so hopefully it's all gone well, and it's already the weekend for all you people,
I know.
so.
Not everybody.
3 little
but-
days.
right.
All right, first order of business is approval of the minutes, if everyone can remember what we talked about in June. I know I struggled, but
I
they
know.
seem to all be, there and accounted for me, so I will make a motion to approve the minutes from June sixth meeting.
Second.
Any discussion?
I just had a question. For the last, under new business, did we discuss the wellness policy or was it that letter for the allergy notification? Yeah, I thought it was the Yeah, I don't remember discussing the wellness policy.
Well, there's
Did we-
there's updates to the wellness policy on your agenda.
Yes.
I think maybe the question was around the need for it to be updated, and we do need to include it in all of our, audits, cafeteria audit even. But it is in your agenda for just some small changes.
Are we striking that, or are we keeping it in this? I don't.
I think it's accurate to say that the subject came up under new business. We just
Okay.
had a general question, it's on the agenda, and that was probably the answer back then, is that we do
Okay.
need to get it voted again.
Okay. All right, any other, questions or suggested edits? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes? Good. Thank you. Okay, next up, the financial report.
Okay, what we have here is the end of the year for June 30th, 2022. As you can see, we spent virtually all the budget, to 99.8%. We continue to spend down our required grants as well as our revolving accounts to come to that last figure. The new budget is up and running right now, and I'll have an update on that at the next meeting.
All right, thank you. Does anyone have any questions on the budget?
Just a general question, because Lisa and I had gone to that training over the summer that the Massachusetts Association of School Committees does. So just questioning, like, if one section is over budget, how are decisions made about where the money is pulled from to cover that expense? Like, is that
We have
something-
conversations from an administrative point of view, if something comes up that is gonna be over, we have conversations on how we're gonna cover it. Sometimes I come to you if it's a large enough item to say the tuitions are over, but there's gonna be funds left in the special ed teacher salaries because of turnover, so we definitely have the conversation, especially for the larger numbers.
Okay, so it
Yep.
would come here if it was a significant
Yep.
dollar amount.
Mhm.
And definitely if it was something that you didn't anticipate you'd be
Yep.
able to cover the
Yep.
expense.
And we will have a follow-up conversation, which we already queued you folks up back in June, that we've got some out-of-district tuition problems. We're gonna wait until we get the new report completely encumbered for next month to update you on that. It will probably be a little better than it felt in June because the state budget did have a higher circuit breaker reimbursement rate that was passed, so that's gonna help that a little bit. But we'll be coming in October, making it very clear where our shortages are and how we think we can get through, or that we don't think we can, and we would have conversations about whether we need to ask the town for assistance. But right now, I'm not in panic mode. I think it's gonna be a very snug year, but we've had conversations about how we can get through, unless we have 2 more placements between now and the end of the month. And it's hard sometimes at the beginning of the year, having everyone get settled in and make sure that we're gonna be able to serve them in the environment, but we're okay, we're okay. Yep.
Anything else in the budget? No? Okay. Thank you. The next
So the only one noted here, which you do have in your packet, is just the posting, which we do at the beginning of every year, of the standing meetings. That doesn't mean we can't change them. If something comes up and we need to vote to change them, we certainly can do that. And I had on my notes to hand out what I already did was just the memo on the state safety initiative, so we're gonna keep our eyes on that and work with your police department to see what grants might be available and what we could tap into.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on, we have the principal's report.
So I do wanna welcome everybody back to what I believe, and I think Deb's gonna talk a little bit about things, but I do believe, just feeling like the first typical year we have had in a very long time. The climate of the building feels wonderful, staff, kids, everybody seems to be in a very good place, and to not have to be constantly worried about shifting and things like that. It's wonderful to be back. Enrollment, as you can see, we're creeping back up to pre-COVID numbers. We were at, I think around this time in 19, we're at a 890 number, so we're there, we're very close, so things are looking good on that front. I do want to just, as always, thank the custodial staff, the administrative assistants, the building technologists, the teachers, everybody for just helping to make opening a success. I want to thank Jamie Disjardin and Bethany Wolfing, who actually headed up both of our summer programs, our special education program, as well as our regular education program. They did a remarkable job. We had hundreds of children here over the summer, so it was wonderful. And we did secure a grant, a DESE grant through the United Way that had us, allowed us to pay for transportation, which hasn't happened in the past. And that really was helpful to a lot of our families, so that was great. And Kathy Davies and her crew provided food to families and attending the summer program as needed. The next is quite a lengthy list of staff changes. We're very much in step with the rest of the country in all facets.
A little mini great resignation going on in education as well as private sector.
Yeah.
Lots
Okay.
of changes, lots of, we're very happy, we congratulate all our retirees, Lisa included. Some resignations, changes in career and things like that. We have been extremely, we had change of assignments, so Tara Fury moved from the nurse assistant to the school nurse. Rebecca Cloutier, who has been an integration assistant, who's done a number of long-term stints here at Burgess, is actually filling in for Catherine Nicholas, who's on a year-long leave in preschool. So, and then a lot of wonderful new hires, we're very excited for them. And as far as professional staffing, we are fully staffed at this point for teaching staff. Support staff, we are still a little short. I did add a little bit to my plug to my kindergarten open house and orientation that we were in need, and we had 3 people respond, so we'll see where we land from there. But it's definitely what we're looking for paraprofessionals in our substantially separate program. So ABA integration assistants. So if anybody is interested or knows of anyone who is interested, please send them my way. Opening day and orientation, again, with your support, as we have done the past few years, we've pushed kindergarten open house and orientation to just before school starts. We hosted that on Wednesday, yesterday, and then the children joined us today with great success. We've got a very nice transition for our kindergarten. You'll please note preschool orientations and the start dates are there, and open house for grades 1 through 6 will be held Wednesday, September 14th in our traditional format. So we'll split it from 5 to 6:30. We'll have grades 1 through 3, and then the overlap of 6 to 7:30 will be grades 4 through 6. For those of you who have children across grade levels, upper elementary and early elementary, and we will be we've asked for parking at OSB like we've done in the past, as you've been here for a while, and we will be providing bus transportation because it gets quite crowded, but we are very much looking forward. Amy, I'm not gonna put you on the spot, but I will. So the reading department, by statute for our Title I grant, our reading department does a parent presentation, and they're going to incorporate that into our into our open house. I do wanna take a minute, I'm remiss, to introduce our building, school committee, school committee members. Delane Burrill and Amy Cantwell, who are both reading specialists, so they'll be here as, we've always had representation from the teachers, we thank you for that, and I apologize for my error on the time for tonight. Curriculum, instruction, and assessment, I think Deb's going to talk about it, but Deb's focus for the year is called Back to Basics, and this is what she's been talking to all the staff about, and the intent is to focus on initiatives implemented just prior or during COVID-19. We've had a lot of things happen. Reading Foundations, so the Wilson Phonics program for the early elementary started, and we were getting on momentum, and then COVID hit. Geodes, Lucy Calkins writing, we had a math initiative, and I could probably go on. So there's a number of things that we started either just before or we implemented during that we now need to provide time and opportunity for our staff to just dig in, get to know it, let us know what they need for additional training, and then we'll go from there. Benchmark assessments will be administered to all grades during the month of September and early October. Professional development, we have an early release day on the 15th, and the focus of that is, there's multiple things that will happen, but one of them in a major focus, which is across all of Union 61, will be on the Department of Education's multi-tiered system of deliveries, which Amy and Delane are very much a part of, and how we support students who may be struggling in all different areas, whether it's academic or social, emotional, and the Department of Education has a very clear format for that and how that should roll out, and we will be providing training for that. Things that didn't make my update that I'm thinking we might have some questions about, just if you're hearing from the community transportation, any delays in anything, I would just ask for grace for the bus company, Wendy, and her drivers. The first couple of days are always challenging. Actually, these first 2 weeks are, and
Yeah.
we get
It's
the
usually
we
a
have the- we have
good,
the-
solid
we
1
have-
or 2 weeks.
It's actually the week after Springfield. You're exactly right, Jenna. It's the 12th we'll start to hit our stride. But things to consider are, number one, we've combined buses. We were 16, we're down at 14 at this point. I'm correct?
Well, I don't recall being 15, I do remember
We were
15, I mean,
16.
I'm 16,
We
I
were.
remember
No,
15.
we were
Is
but-
that because of bus driver shortage or?
A little
money?
both.
Okay.
A little bit.
It's not money,
And it
but
may have,
shortage and where are the needs to try and keep the routes.
it may have been
As-
ridership as well, because did
Yep.
anybody pick up this week? Were you picked up and dropped off? What did you notice?
Lot less.
And we believe that might be multifaceted. It might be
I've been pick up
COVID.
drop off for
It
since
mi-
preschool.
It
Yeah.
might be COVID, it might also be gas, so we're not sure. So
Yeah.
we do see a greater utilization of the buses, which we really encourage people to do. So that seems to be definitely a good trend that we've seen. But things to consider is that, like, say we get a late registration, and it's on the opposite side of the street of where the bus is typically picking up, that route has to get totally rerouted. Do you know what I'm saying? So
Well, if it's on
Yeah.
a busy road, we
So,
don't want them
right.
crossing busy roads.
So
but-
Wendy will
rural
have
roads and-
live data on
Yeah,
Friday
it's-
before we start school. We call her and let her know, oh, we have a child who's moved into such and such an address. That changes that route, and that happens a lot. We have close to 50 new registrants every year. So just, understanding that that's something that if you're hearing within the community, we just appreciate some support in
Full
that
buses,
regard.
late buses, I don't
Yep.
usually panic for at least the first 2 weeks.
Um,
And remember, for the first couple of days, every kid that gets on the bus needs their picture taken.
Correct, especially the kindergartens, right? MCAS data is out it's not even embargoed yet, no, it's not, we've been able to look at it from a lens of discrepancy filing if we see something that looks wrong. Typically by this time, even last year, we have what's called embargoed
Yeah.
MCAS results, which we can share within the school, but we can't share it publicly. That usually happens October, November, but we don't have even the embargo
No, I
data at
think-
this time.
I
I
think
do,
they just extended embargo.
yeah, because they haven't even set the scaled
Right.
scores, so it's going to be delayed. we'll let you know, and as we always do, there'll be a presentation in November for you to go through that. The last thing I have that didn't make it to my agenda is actually fields. So if you'll recall, in the spring, we actually secured the support of the town to do some major in-field work on the fields. That is ongoing, scheduling is happening, I don't, again, it's sort of a town project and not a Burgess project at this point. The other thing I want to bring up is that there has been conversation about, and I believe it's the backfield, baseball field, is actually on the town level of turfing the field and lighting it. They have wanted to engage in conversation. I wanted to talk to you folks. It wouldn't be part of the Burgess budget, it would be something on the town end. Before we have conversation, I just wanna make sure that I've let you know, and if it's okay, we will proceed in having conversation.
Do we take a vote on that?
You don't have to vote on it, I think you just need to give us permission. I think as we move forward, you would have to take
Yeah,
a
we'll
vote.
take a
I
formal
give
vote for you.
permission.
Okay.
So that's a hell yes. A free
Alright, so-
field, a free turf in a lit field.
I will,
You don't have to mow.
I will
Fight about it
text
at the
Paul
town
and let him
meeting.
know that that's your response,
Yeah.
okay? And I think he's been in communication with Amy Graciello, and it's gaining some momentum, so we wanna move forward with having just conversation and just letting you know that it's okay.
Awesome.
Okay. I think that's it for me. Questions for me? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend.
Okay, superintendent's report.
All right, I will actually just start with piggybacking off of the opening day. We did absolutely on day one commit to back to basics being our mantra. And back to basics isn't just getting back to the curriculum we've been trying to get trained on, it's back to, as I said, it's getting back to building those core relationships between students and staff, and getting out of 2 years of isolation and really reminding yourselves what the basic and core of education is. And to that note, we were hoping to get staff engaged, and I think in most buildings, they did get engaged. Where we, as a leadership team, agreed, I put it out on my opening morning speech to let them know that when they went back to the classrooms, the principals, or the buildings, when they had their faculty meetings, we all agreed we wanted the principals to kind of kick off the year getting staff involved, and they asked them to give 3 words to describe an effective educator. So I have to share with you Burgess's results in the pretty little Mentimeter, and I think they,
Did you
yes,
get it
yes,
off?
it's
Did
all
you get
set.
it off?
Yes, it's all good.
We had a typo.
Just a little typo problem. It's all fine, I'm on top of it.
Is it a fun typo?
No, it's not, well, funny you should,
It's funny you should use the word
actually, you know what,
fun.
that is an off-camera
That's-
conversation.
It's funny you should use the
But,
word
1, 2,
fun.
3, 4, 5. So this is just a quick picture of Burgess's, which is great to see. I think what you would hope that your staff would think are effective educators, and what that should mean they want to give to your children and your students. And we're hoping that we just sort of use that as a springboard to have conversations throughout the year of what are the core beliefs and values, what brought you to this profession, and try and find the joy. Get back to basics also means getting back to the joy of, hopefully that's what brought you to this profession.
Vocation. It's a
Exactly.
calling, yeah.
So that's a little bit more on opening day with staff only. I think it went well, and then everything went great. I mean, there are always transportation blips, so I usually carve that out and say, other than that, how are things? And I think it was a great opening
Yeah,
couple
the
of days
timing
with
has
the
been great,
kids.
but as Jenna
Yeah.
said, don't get used to it because next week is the flea
Yeah,
market.
just when things settle, but, and imagine, as bad as you all feel, imagine if you were actually Brimfield. Because it's a mess. And one little FYI that's not noted here, we did make the decision over the summer, after reviews and piloting, to move the student information system to PowerSchool. That is a process, and I promised staff we weren't going to be asking them to learn anything new this year. It really will be the end of the year before we start programming, transferring data, and get rolling. The junior high and high school will probably start dabbling in it as they start building the schedules for next year, because those are more complex, and that'll happen in the new the new database. But I think it's a great, application that staff as well as parents will really like. And then finally, as is noted here, I did just give you all an FYI over the summer that we did get legal notice that your bus drivers are looking to unionize. I received notice from the Teamsters. So I am working with our legal counsel, who has filled out the paperwork that's been asked so far, and we're just now waiting for whatever the next step is. I think it, maybe within the next month or so, that we would probably receive a reach out to start negotiating. So I'm looking for you folks to vote or agree upon, your chair can actually, the unanimous consent, appoint, but I would recommend that you have a negotiating committee ready. Steve and/or I will work with you, and I would suggest that since it's a brand new unit that we have our legal counsel, you have great legal counsel that's worked through a number of sticky things with us, including union negotiations over the last couple of years. And the other suggestion I would make is when you're determining, hopefully one or two of you would like to be involved in that negotiation, I would recommend that you also vote or agree to have Mike Valenzola, who is the chair from Tantascwa, and does have impact, even though these are town of Sturbridge employees, they provide transportation for both school districts, so there's an impact to the Tantascwa district / budget also. So my recommendation, whatever you come up with, is that you vote, if you agree to have Mike Valenzola participate, and do any of you want to volunteer?
Volunteer. I'll do it with her. So we have Sam,
That's
Jackie.
your call, if you're good with that. You definitely don't want three.
Anyone else wanna
You don't want the majority
fight
of
for
your
the-
committee to be on the negotiating committee, so
I did the pair one and I enjoyed that. I love
So
negotiating
it's your
committee,
folks,
so
I don't know how.
But I'm happy that you ladies have stepped up, so thank you, and, yeah, we'll go.
So we're gonna go with,
Sam
Sam
and Jackie. And is everyone in agreement with Mike Valenzola as well, as representative to us? Yeah, perfect, thank you.
I will keep you all posted. And that's it for me tonight.
Thank you. Okay, we're at public access. Nothing, great, okay, going once, going twice. Subcommittee reports.
I don't think you have any.
Oh, great. And me again, and no. Unfinished business.
We don't think we have any of that either.
No? I would say the only thing was maybe what we went into executive session about was learning more about Alice and all that, so that was one thing that we closed out on.
I just wanted to thank the Sturbridge Police Department for helping us with the opening of this week, because I did notice the cruisers following the bus routes and the presence here during drop-off, so I just wanted to thank the Sturbridge Police Department, from this.
Wonderful, yep, lots of support.
Hey, Kristen,
Yep.
we had, at our last meeting, touched a little bit on the letter that went home to parents about food allergies. And I don't know where in this meeting I can, bring that up again. I'd like to seriously look at it, so I have a copy of the old one and a draft of the newer one. Would this
Okay.
be the time?
Yeah, I think so, if it was brought up previously, yes.
Okay. So the reason we're bringing it up is we send it home at the beginning of the school year to all of our parents to bring awareness to food allergies, serious ones in the classroom. So we're looking at every time. This was the page on top was drafted when we drafted our first food allergy policy about 8 or 9 years ago. It was pretty severe and strict about, no foods with these items in the classroom. And it causes a lot of anxiety to some of the parents whose kids eat peanut butter and only peanut butter, for example. They say that they can't eat that in the classroom. And they get a lot of questions to the teachers and to the school nurses. So now that we have no celebrations anymore, we used to do birthday parties and holiday parties. We don't do that anymore. So I think we wanted to look at letting them know that this is happening, explaining that we don't do food celebrations. We do have the allergy aware table in the cafeteria for those who choose to. Adults wash the tables in the caf, and children sit at their own space for their snack. So it's a little bit lighter on making parents feel their child didn't have a choice of food items. And then at the bottom of the first original, we had them signing and returning, so teachers and nurses have to keep track of every one of those. And we feel that because we've changed our protocols so much on food sharing that we just wanted to build awareness.
So that changed the ones that I got sent.
Yeah,
Sent them to me.
but we didn't wanna wait, we figured we
Got
had to
it.
follow the same.
Got it.
So I can just pass these down?
Okay.
Thank you.
So then would new ones go home to follow up the ones that just went out?
We could do that,
I think that might be helpful.
but yeah, once you read it, see what you think.
So the top one is.
The old one.
Top one's the original one. And you'll see I here sign, my name's on the second one. The top one just seems to have a lot of confusion. And we're not in that preschool and things like that, we're always answering those questions.
So this isn't an official policy, and it's also not something that's in the handbook, it was just like kind of a bolt-on of a
It's part of our
notification.
policy. It's in with our policy, it's a letter we have to use.
But I don't think
But
your
it's-
formal voted policy has a letter.
Right,
It's probably in your handbook, so you don't need to vote to change the letter,
right.
because I don't think it's part of any of our
Right.
formal
No,
policies.
right.
So
But I-
we can just execute those policies as we feel fit with the letters.
And you would remember, Kristen, so just the year prior to my coming here, there was a lot with the policy, with all of this.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
this is what was put in place 9 years
Right.
ago.
Yep.
So Lisa's feeling that as time has elapsed, that it really isn't as necessary as it may have been at
Well,
the
and
time.
because I think it's procedure, it's a question of procedure, but I think Lisa's right, because it was a big conversation, it was a big concern, wanting to make you folks aware that we may be slightly altering our procedure, or our documents
Yeah.
behind the procedure, just in full disclosure, because it was such a big
Oh,
topic
yeah, that
of
was like the last
conversation.
time we had public access.
Yes.
So we had
You're
parents
right.
here, was that 9 years
Exactly,
ago?
exactly. So it's not really a formal vote, but a general unanimous
FYI,
consent, as long
yeah.
as everyone's okay.
Okay,
And
yeah.
knows, then we'll go forward and do with what the
Okay.
office feels is the best.
The question is,
Sure.
so is this still saying that students in that classroom shouldn't bring that item?
It's discouraged, but they
Okay.
still can do it.
Okay, cause I think you're probably still gonna get questions just with, I know you wanna say it's discouraged, but I would take, like, if I got this at home, I would take it as like, my kid should bring that.
But it says the next line, it is discouraged.
I know it does. I think they'll still get questions, so if it were me and it was peanut butter, I'm not gonna send my kid with peanut butter, but if you have a family.
So if it were me and it's peanut butter, my kid comes with peanut butter every day.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we've gone through
Peanut butter
food
what?
school and, you know, this is what he eats. So I would think that we would be accommodating to remove that student maybe from that classroom and put him in a classroom where there isn't a peanut allergy, like.
Or they just don't sit next to each other to eat.
Right,
something
no,
like
I'm not
that.
saying that you can't eat peanut butter, just that I think there's still gonna be questions for the nurse. If the goal was to reduce the questions, I think there probably
I
will
think,
still be
I
some.
think it's still important, but I think it's a softer approach. to it.
Yeah.
I'd like to try this and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, the language is still the same, it still says it's discouraged, just like it did previously.
Right.
And
But
just,
you're not like signing your life away.
you know, so, well, and even there, it's like, I'll do my part, everyone's idea of doing their part is different, so it was always a
No one
little
wants us
loose,
to
and
do
now
our
it's just a
part.
little, even lighter touch on the, signature and acknowledgement.
I will say that letter gave me significant anxiety
Right.
when Rory first came here.
And we don't
Yeah.
want to do that.
Yeah, because sometimes kids are grabbing their own stuff and throwing it in their bag, and you don't know, and, you know, they don't know what you signed off on.
I wish my
Especially
kids
the-
would grab their own stuff.
Well, okay, do we wanna take just a general, like, is everyone okay with this change in the language of this letter? And if so, would we then send out the revised letter or are we just going with what we already
Okay.
sent out?
I'm happy to.
I think I'm okay with it, and I don't necessarily feel like it's necessary to send a revised letter.
I don't think it's necessary to send the letter either. I think that will.
Maybe cause confusion.
Exactly, and they've already signed
Mhm.
that.
So starting next year?
Would you feel like they need to track who's getting, like, who brings the papers back?
It's a lot.
I would say no,
I don't think that we need to.
especially where it's,
Yeah.
you know, we know that that's going away, I would say no on the compliance piece of it, just if
Okay.
they return it, great, if not, who cares, and we just move along with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that concludes unfinished business, and so we have got a lot in store on new business.
We do, but it can be a lot easier than it looks.
Well,
I
I
promise.
chunked it here with my notes, but
Okay.
it's still a lot. There's
Yep.
a lot of reading.
There is, I'm
Boy, there's a
sorry,
lot of
I'm
reading.
sorry, we left these, see, we thought we did you a favor and left them dangling out there in June. We could have pushed them through in June, because they've gone through Tantascwa, but we said,
Yeah.
let's not start something at first reading in June and then have to remember it as second
yeah.
reading, so we're starting fresh.
Starting fresh.
And I, you could either do all the new ones together, or we could do new individual, and then I bet you could vote lumped together. I'll go through and explain the amendments and the rescinds. But if we start and I at least go through the new ones that you don't have on your books, the first of which is probably the most, somewhat, I wouldn't call it critical, but as you can see, we talked a little bit about the use of therapy, comfort dogs in schools. You have, your Sturbridge Police Department is seeking to purchase via a grant a comfort dog, and your SRO, as luck would have it, wants to be its handler. So we would love to, ask you to accept this on first reading. I can say, we, in looking as, I think we talked a little bit before, that paragraph kind of number 5, this is written sort of globally. There's a number of school districts that have something out here, MASC has one like this. So in many other districts, it's not the local police department that's actually running the program. It's awesome that ours wants to. But this is written globally, so it could be a school staff member or volunteer who owns the dog, trains the dog, feeds the dog. So that paragraph that says a handler is an individual school staff member, I would suggest that we make it an individual school staff member, comma, volunteer, or town police department, because they're going to be owning this particular dog, if you're all okay with it, who owns the dog and individually trains it. So it's the police department that will own it. They will have the training done, and this will happen to be your SRO. I wouldn't wanna put SRO there because it implies that officer owns the dog, and that's not gonna be this case. So I would suggest we just amend this before accepting the first reading to say district staff member, volunteer, or town police department who owns a therapy dog and who has been individually trained, evaluated, registered, etc. Other than that, are there any?
Just had one quick
Mhm.
thing at that, and maybe I missed it, and I know it's policy already to make sure people are Cory checked as volunteers, but I thought maybe if we,
Yeah, that is part of your Cory policy.
Okay.
One of your policies is every volunteer and employee has to be Cory. Employees also have to be fingerprinted. It is your discretion to decide whether volunteers are
I
fingerprinted.
think something like this, where they're gonna be in the school quite often.
Well, and we would make that decision, in this
Okay.
particular case, it's your police officer.
Right.
If ever, we would wanna come to you and tell you if there was someone else that we were letting bring in their therapy dog. And yes, and I wouldn't disagree at that point that you might wanna say, we should fingerprint. We don't have a procedure to say every volunteer has to be fingerprinted, because that costs them. And we, as long as we get a Cory, we're okay. But there are absolutely cases where it makes sense to. So I don't think we need to note it here, but I also think your Cory and fingerprint, your background check policy does imply that administration and school committee can decide if more fingerprinting is needed.
Deb, I'd like to entertain, after the word volunteer, get rid of who owns a therapy dog.
Okay?
So we're talking about the handler, individual, staff member, volunteer, who has been individually trained, evaluated, and on and on. I think we don't need to read the ownership piece in.
We don't, other than the point of this policy is to make it very clear that that dog does not belong to this school.
That's in the next paragraph,
Okay,
the first sentence.
of the handler. Got it. Okay, nope, you're right. That's great.
And the only other thing I thought of, I didn't see anywhere that, all parents would be notified.
I really think it was here someplace.
We do need to do that because we would need to have people inform us if
But I
it was a.
really thought we did not. And I'll also, because you also have another policy that's just, animals in school buildings.
Allergies and aversions.
Where are you seeing that?
Designated schools such as instances where the child suffers from aversions. So,
Yeah.
where it says allergies and aversions, I think we could just add a statement in that, families would be notified, to notify us, but, you know.
What about under health and safety?
I think it's more appropriate under allergies and aversions, because those are the kids, those are the individuals that I would be most concerned about, that we wanna keep the dog away from, right? Does everybody?
We could add communication.
Yeah, does that make
Okay.
sense? Okay. So, I don't have the language.
Yeah, I mean, again, like, what do you, because
It would,
I don't wanna set it, because again, you're looking at probably having a therapy dog in your building every single day with the handler.
Right.
So it may be a global communication at the beginning of the program that we do have this, we're aware of allergies, and if you want to be sure your child never has any contact at all with the therapy comfort dog, let us know.
Would be
That's
a
okay.
communication, but would.
Yeah, I think that might have to be at the beginning of every school year,
Yeah, right.
not just once when the program starts.
Bring this to.
Annual, yep.
All right, so we will add for next month a communication piece. We'll just add another section called, at the very end, called communication. Actually, I'll say to staff and families. And I will draft something for next month. If you're okay accepting on first reading with an added communications, then next month we can move to second reading and just edit it a little bit if we have to.
So one more question. So this is not replacing the other animal policy that we have for schools, which
Correct.
is IMG. That one specifically references, it doesn't say therapy dogs, like
No,
it
it-
references something else. And if we're gonna have a therapy dog in the school every day, should we think about adding therapy dog into that policy, which I know is not what we're
I'll
looking at
review it
right now.
again, but I really think we looked at those and we thought having a very specific therapy dog was really important. That other one still holds.
Yes, I don't disagree with you, it just, I can't remember the exact wording, but it said something like, you know, dogs are not allowed on premises unless they fit into these categories, and therapy dog wasn't listed.
It- Your call, I can pull it, I think the fact that you have a policy clearly saying that they are allowed in covers it, because we went through a lot of conversation about just adding a therapy dog section to that policy, and we ended with wanting to make sure
It's
we had
more
something
rounded, yeah.
very clearly standalone.
Right. No, I do think this is necessary, I just would maybe wanna look at that to see if just that wording should be added in.
And that one is to IMG.
Correct, IMG, yes.
Okay, any other discussion on IMG dash A? I don't think we made the motion to, but I would like to make a motion to, accept upon first reading policy IMG dash A. And then we just have to, someone has to second the motion, and then I'll just.
I will second the motion.
Okay, and then we will make sure there's no additional discussion upon first reading only. Remember, we're gonna talk about this again next meeting. So if there's no more discussion on first reading, all in favor of accepting IMG dash A upon first reading?
All right, then the next one, I'm trying to find the JVA in the back, because the next one is listed here as new, which is JICK, harassment of students, but down the bottom, when you see in the rescinding, there's a different number, JBA, with a slightly different title. And I think they're very close to the same, but MASC is just messing with us. This is more robust. JICK has got more details to it.
More harassers.
Correct,
The
unfortunately.
other one is just student to student.
It's very
This is
sad.
students, employees,
Right.
vendors, third parties.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it is the latest recommendation from a legal perspective as
Yeah.
well as MASC, that we adopt this one and call it JICK.
Right.
And in a little bit, we're gonna rescind JBA,
Right.
okay?
Okay, so let's start off by saying, I will make the motion to, accept upon first reading, policy JICK.
Second.
Discussion about policy JICK. Questions, comments?
So the question about, we also have a bullying policy that we're looking at. At some point, does this defer to that, or how do they relate to each other?
You probably have, and, I mean, that actually is one of the key points. Bullying actually is different than harassing, and that is
Right.
part of the administrator's job to A, help educate, B, investigate whether it is truly bullying versus harassing. So there are two different policies with two different processes to look into.
Yep.
The bullying stays, unfortunately, and actually you've got amendments coming up on that.
Yes. Questions?
So the bullying policy kind of goes into more detail about, like texting, social media, all of that piece. Harassment seems like it must occur on school property. Is that accurate? So harassment
It also
couldn't
has
happen.
texting, blogging, other technological methods in the harassment one as well.
Yeah, it can be, it's more,
It's right here.
and bullying tends to be more of repeated, intentional repeated,
Okay.
which is usually where the grayness comes from. The administrators have to figure out if it's just, acting up, not getting along, or repeated intentionally targeting to cause harm, physical or emotional.
And it also, Jackie, in that first paragraph,
It
it
does.
talks more about the location of the activity.
It's being more prominent on school.
Right,
Mhm.
which is, that was kind of
Yeah.
my concern, was
Yeah.
that if it's being done through social media or something
Mhm.
that's not on a school premises, so then it would
Come under the
not be,
bullying
it would
policy.
fall under bullying.
And I think you wouldn't wanna have to litigate these because it is very.
They are, they're, and again,
And there, well, I mean,
I wouldn't
not so
wanna be
much
the
this
legal
one.
counsel that reviews them all either and puts them out to
No, I know,
us.
because the language is.
Yeah, but we
yeah.
review them by the legal counsel, I mean, they give them to us,
Right.
yep.
There's one correction, if you have Sturbridge Elementary Schools at the beginning, you only have one, so I'm just removing this.
And where is that?
The first
Second,
sentence.
Oh, yeah.
second sentence.
Any other discussion, questions on this one? Okay. Hearing none, make a motion to accept policy JICK on first reading. All in favor? Next.
Okay, and then we have that, I gotta tell you, Lisa, I don't know if it was on Tantasco's books or it's brand new, but administering medicines to students, we don't have on our books. It is a recommendation by MASC that we do have it
Okay.
with the cross-references and the legals. I think the, MGL 7154B might have changed slightly. But I think it's pretty standard, and some of these, very often we're in the quandary on whether to vote a policy or not. If the policy is just stating the law, do you really have to have a policy, because we have to live by the law? And sometimes we say, where are your families gonna go? Are they gonna go to the law book first, or are they gonna go to your policy? And if it's something that we think people will go to fairly regularly, we'd just repeat the law in a policy. But there's some legal references here, and just a general, I think we go by this protocol. We know who can and cannot administer medications to students, and that when we administer, we need to make sure our staff is trained and
We are following
go
this.
through the Department of Public Health.
And as a district, we don't delegate medication, so this is easy. The only thing that a student would self-administer would be during hands-on field trip. So there is a check-off section on a medication form that parents and doctors sign that allows them to self-administer, and the nurse has to be comfortable with that. Basically, what we do on field trips, if the child's comfortable and we've trained them and the parents are aware, we have a list of steps that you take to administer yourself an inhaler. The teachers are only asked to read those 6 steps to the child and then just supervise if they take it. If they're not responsible, we don't delegate that.
Can I
EpiPens,
ask,
no kids give to themselves, they just grant.
and as I'm looking at this and I'm remembering, this went through Tantascwa first and then rolls down to elementary, and we do our best to say, every now and then we snag one that just isn't relevant to elementary. So, but the last one here, Lisa, which at the Tantascwa level anyway, students with life-threatening allergies may possess self-administer EpiPen. Is that an option here at the elementary?
I would leave it because they're
Okay.
allowed to carry in
Yep.
their backpacks, and some of my older kids do know how
Yep.
they've been trained. So we
Great.
can leave that.
I think it's listed in the law as well, I
Mhm.
saw that earlier. Just one other comment, Deb, when I looked on our policies online, this was actually listed, so I don't know.
Then I wonder if they've already put it up ahead of JLCD,
It was JLCD, but this has actually a few additional sentences.
so they may have
So-
failed to highlight the changes.
Okay, so the changes start on the 3rd line with if a student has,
Okay.
and the last sentence is already in the existing policy.
Okay. So if it's already up there under Sturbridge for sure, then we can just vote this as an amendment on first reading.
Mhm.
And since we're there, go ahead
So,
and vote
do
that
we
one.
just wanna say that
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve upon first reading the apparent amendment of policy JLCD? All in favor?
So then the next one is, it's another one of those swaps. KE, public complaints, is new and is replacing, so to speak, down the end, down more, we're gonna go JIAA, which is student complaints and grievances. They've lumped them all here. The previous one is just a little bit less robust. But this public complaints here pretty much goes and spells out what we hopefully have all known. If there is a complaint that, especially when it's parent and student related, that it goes first to the teacher, and if that does not result in positive or satisfactory results, they'll move on to the administrator, then the superintendent, and then the worst case, you folks.
Okay, so let's start by, I'll make the motion to accept upon first reading the new policy KE. Can I get a second on that? And then we'll do discussion. Okay. Questions, discussion on policy KE?
I have some discussion. The verbiage on this kind of suggests, in my opinion, to the public that they cannot come to us or that we will not do anything to help them, and I don't think that sits well with the community or parents. When I read this, I felt like, well, if I wanna go to my school committee, I'm gonna go to my school committee. And I feel like if it's worded this way and we're like, no, we can't do anything to that parent, you have to go here, just the verbiage of it, I think we can find a better way to kind of suggest that, because it just turns me off the verbiage there.
You are welcome to recommend some changes. I think that is the point. I think you folks get approached at the ball field on a regular basis for things that you shouldn't get approached to, and we advise you all the time to direct folks to the principal
Which-
or the
yes.
teacher, which is kind of what's implied here. There are certain things, and part of the training helps you know what is in your purview and what is not. And the general public rarely knows for sure what is within the school committee's purview and not. So I think this is kind of starting to say, which I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, the goal is always to resolve the problem as close to the origin as possible. So where is the problem? It is very rarely with a school committee member.
So Samantha,
yeah.
I'm gonna agree with you that, because I do appreciate when you folks hear things and that you call me or you email or text me. I greatly appreciate that relationship. So
Sure.
I, you know, again, that's something I wouldn't want to
This
stop.
is coming to you.
But what I would want, like, one of the things when a parent calls me about a situation in the classroom, my first question is, have you spoken to the teacher? And if they say yes, and then of course, then I move forward. If they say no, I say, can, you please reach out and just, run it by them and let me, and if it's not resolved, let me know. But again, it's just trying to keep things, in their lane, I guess, right? Again, I agree with you, because when I first read it, I said, wait a minute, that's not my relationship with my committee, and that they're at the ball field and somebody's talking about something. But I understand, it also can be interfering in situations, so.
I just wouldn't wanna discourage anyone from coming forward with something, whether it be big or small.
Maybe this resident isn't comfortable with that teacher, maybe they're also not comfortable with the principals, maybe they're not comfortable with the administration, maybe they're comfortable with the mom at the football field. I just feel that, and I don't like exceptions will be made when the complaints concern committee actions or committee operations only. I don't like that verbiage either. We are elected to this committee, and I would like to reserve the right to bring forth complaints in open meeting or executive session. Not that I've had to, but I would like to reserve that right to do so by people who voted for me on here.
Yeah, I mean, you can recommend, we can agree to disagree. I think you absolutely should bring to us if you hear something out in the community. I agree that the only way we can really resolve things correctly is when folks come tell us firsthand what their issues are. I get people are uncomfortable and hope that if people come to me, I say the same thing. Have you talked to the principal yet? I wanna hear you, I agree you have a concern, and we have to be very cautious when we bring stuff up at a public hearing, at a public meeting. Because then it's very quick to identify things that we shouldn't be identifying publicly, which is why, we wanna try and steer them the right way, but in no way saying, and you're right, I don't wanna jump in and assume that I know the whole story. I don't wanna jump in and try and fix something and then it turns out I actually broke it more. But I also wanna make it very clear, if you've talked to Kathy and not gotten resolution, or still feel uncomfortable, then yes, come to me. And if someone wants to come and talk to you folks, I would even strongly recommend they come to me first, so we can talk through where on the agenda we put that. How do we do that? Is this an executive session conversation? Is it something that we can make sure we talk about publicly that doesn't get us into any legal problems? And sometimes I can help folks who wanna come to you work through that and make sure we don't get into trouble. But if you wanna put this on hold and come up with or unless you already have a recommended change, that's fine.
I guess, so that's where my confusion would be. So I have had situations where I have, reached out to Mrs. Pelly,
Yep.
to you.
Yep.
And I've directed people to both of you, as well as teachers. exceptions will be made when the complaints concern committee actions or committee operations only. So with that said, so something gets escalated to Mrs. Kelly, then it goes to Mrs. Boyd, then we have a meeting, it gets put on our agenda, we go into an executive session. But that's not committee actions or committee operations only, like how do we vote on putting that on an agenda? Like,
Well, no,
it's
I
just very
think,
confusing.
Sam, what I think this is saying is that we don't wanna deny anybody, but that you will refer them through the proper administrative channels. So first and foremost, it's saying we wanna hear you, but we're gonna ask you to go through the channels and talk to the principal and talk to the superintendent before coming to you folks. But even then, well, you could make exceptions and have something come right to you, but it's gotta be something in your purview.
Correct.
They cannot come right to you
Oh, I understand
to
that.
deal with disciplinary action for a teacher. That's all that means is, you know what, sure, there's times when we're not gonna deal with the principal or superintendent, it'll come right to you, but it's gotta be something within your purview, because you can't talk about certain things, and you can reword how that's said, but I think that's the point there, is to say there are certain things that it doesn't come under the school committee's purview, and you can jump to the front of the line, no problem at all, as you just said. You choose to listen to someone, that's fine, but don't listen to someone about something that isn't in your purview, that's when you have, because then you'll get into trouble.
Well, right,
Yeah.
right, no, and I've never.
Yeah, no, I know you,
Advice
I know you
like
have
that,
it, I
but
think that's the point of that language, and you
Right.
know what, policies are dry, policies are
Yeah.
dry, cold language.
I would like, I think I like the exceptions will be made when the complaints concern committee actions or committee operations only. I would be more comfortable with that redacted.
Okay,
That would make me more comfortable.
okay. Great. Then we can make, if you want to vote that with as amended, so you're gonna vote on first reading, KE on first reading as amended,
With that exception, will we need sentence?
stricken, yep, yep.
Is there other discussion or proposed edits for this policy? No? Okay. All right, then I'll make the motion to accept policy KE as amended upon first reading. All in favor? Thank you. You said this was an easy day.
I'm sorry, I absolutely, new ones are understandably new ones, they should be, have a little bit of a conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so now we've got a handful, and you let me know, let's see how it goes, if there's no questions, we'll just keep going to the next one, and you can vote some of them in a lump when we're done, but let's see where we go. So we tried to make it clear what the amendments are. So JIC, as you can see, the large majority are just housekeeping, adding the word guardian
Right.
with parent.
I just had one, sorry, I don't want
Yep.
to be here anymore, anyone else. I had one question on that. For the definition of extracurriculars, so does that include like flag football or cheerleading that happens on Burgess property? Okay,
No.
just wanna make sure.
Nope, I have enough to do.
Nope,
I have
exactly,
enough to do.
exactly.
Thank
That
you.
there's anything after school is enough. Yeah, not a
On
problem.
that turf lit field.
Oh, no, forget it, rescind that support, that's funny.
Okay, so let's start off by saying, do we, or I'll make the motion to approve upon first reading, policy JIC as amended. Okay. Other discussion on JIC?
I just wanted to ask, why, the pages aren't numbered, the next third page from yours. It just says if the student is in a public preschool program or in grades K through 3, the principal shall send a copy to the superintendent. Why wouldn't it be K through 6?
Need to tell, I
It's
missed
right
one more.
above superintendent's hearing.
What page?
Like the fourth page.
Towards the end.
The fourth page 4, the paragraph above superintendent's name.
Yeah, it says K through 3.
Yeah, don't know. Well, that clearly should be 6.
Yeah, no, it's definitely.
Yep. Okay. They have an amendment.
Mhm.
Good catch. For sure.
That's good.
And that's gotta be a
Not bad
typo, cause
word.
if this thing started at Tantascwa, it was a 7 through 12.
Right.
And then I have one question on page 3. So we added a lot of guardian, parent and guardian. The second paragraph says, in addition to the rights afforded to the student in short-term suspension hearing, the student has the following rights. Does the parent or guardian all have the rights to that information as well? Or is that implied because the student is a minor?
Say again which one you're on?
So the second paragraph
Yeah,
that says at a minimum.
yeah.
So at the end of that first line, it says the student shall have the following rights. Does
It should say student slash parent
slash
slash
parent
guardian.
Sure.
Mhm. Yeah. Again, that's what that's good. Mhm.
Yeah.
Any other catches in this one? No? Great, thank you. All right, so, again, make a motion to accept upon first reading the amended policy JIC.
second?
All in favor?
Okay, then JICFB, what is gonna happen when all is said and done is we're replacing JICFB1 with JICFB, getting rid of the one policy, which was the "and" intervention. And then, but you can see what it was there. It's a bit updated from a legal perspective, way back when you could actually list the various different transmission, and there's all kinds of electronic cyberbullying options, so it's just plain old, of any nature, period. Yeah, it absolutely, it's updates based on the law.
Mhm.
And there's a little bit of, housekeeping there, changing, and if, yeah, there's just, some of it is just, we did add, the school resource officer on the second to the last page in there, since we have one.
I have a question. On the second page, prevention and intervention plan, we are striking bus drivers, is that because they have, intent to unionize?
No, that,
Why are we striking?
Oversee the development and prevention, well, may include. This one could include bus drivers. I think the recommendation, when they pulled it out, was in places where bus drivers aren't run by that particular school district.
Yeah, I was gonna say, are they
Which they are
considered
here, so I
considered
feel like we
staff?
can, if it's an outside vendor, they're not staff, and,
Okay.
and you don't have the ability, I think we can, and for the foreseeable future, we can leave them in here.
So
Um,
we would,
Tantascwa probably struck it because 4 out of 5 of their towns are outsourced.
So we would include it
I
then
would leave
on-
bus drivers.
on everywhere, like if you just do a find, right, because it is actually on the
Well, it's
first
on first
page,
page too, yes.
in the second paragraph, and you just called out the second page in that middle.
Well, in the first
But not limited,
paragraph,
they
we
took
made
out
it school
everything.
staff members, and they would be considered,
Just to-
they would be,
just
they
to
would be
grab
covered
everybody,
school
yeah.
staff members.
But what if we were outsourcing due to constraints, if we,
Well, if we were outsourcing, we wouldn't have the ability, they wouldn't be school staff, and we wouldn't have the ability to manage that.
They wouldn't fall under this
Correct.
policy? No.
So we have reference to Tantasco Regional School District in a few cases. Are we technically Union 61 school district, or?
Nope, we should be changing that to Sturbridge Public Schools.
Okay, so I have two of those. One is on the second page under reporting.
Those are the ones we usually catch,
The
or
second
that,
page.
those are usually the few things that come to these meetings are, we forgot to take Tantasco out, or we added too many elementary schools. I think there's one coming up with it. So
there's a
I
bunch
see
of them,
one
yeah.
there,
There's
which,
one on the third page under target assistance.
yeah.
So the two on page two.
Sturbridge School District. We'll do a search and replace.
Yeah.
This is the, no, that's the one you're rescinding. This one's going here. And then just one other question, on the first page, under bullying is prohibited, what would be an example of the differences between like school-sponsored activities and functions or programs on and off school grounds? So we're adding that last bullet.
Oh, when,
Yeah, all the way across.
So we're obligated to investigate if something was brought to our attention, so this sort of dovetails a little bit, Jenna,
Right.
on what you had said, but we are required to investigate. If it's brought to our attention, we have to investigate regardless of setting.
Okay,
Mhm.
so if it had nothing to do with school and it's
We
brought
have
to
to
your attention, it's
investigate,
still
we have to,
okay.
we're.
This is how we
it's
get
our
involved in
statute,
the
yeah.
at-home social media.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
Personal experience.
Mhm.
Okay, so a lot of edits I'm hearing.
Yep.
Any other edits or substance questions that, callouts that we wanna make on this first reading? None at this point, okay? All right, so let's, make the motion to, accept upon first reading the amended policy JICFB. Second. All in favor?
Okay, JJ. If you'll remember, the subcommittee at Tantascwa N likes to kind of clean out editorialized stuff. So that's kind of what they have stricken, is just the editorializing of, saying that we'll provide a broad and balanced program of activities. The two bullets that they, wanted, again, because it kind of gets gray and mushy, I don't know how, who defines
Yeah.
the school will coordinate activities that complement programs already available to students through their homes and communities. That is like, who is gonna, exactly. So, the recommendation,
squishy there.
exactly.
Okay.
So the recommendation was to kind of clean out the squishy, put the guardians in,
Yep. Okay.
and then renumber.
All right, so I will start by entertaining the motion to accept upon first reading the amended policy JJ. Is there a second? Second. And then I'll say, ask if there's any discussion or questions or corrections.
Just again,
Sure.
extracurricular is not referring to after school, sports, yada, yada, yada.
Something we clearly put out, extracurricular is gonna be something we put out there
Perfect.
as, yeah. And it's really, it's more, I mean, you know what they are, you don't question what they are at Tantascwa.
Right.
They're those after-school clubs, Burgess has
ASC.
occasional clubs, you've got your enrichment programs, those kinds of things.
Any other questions? Okay, all in favor?
Okay, JK, you can see in the middle there, just the suggestion to, add and note that these rules will be included in the student handbook. This is really just a flow, this is the housekeeping, they're suggesting just taking the last sentence and putting it into the middle.
Got it.
That is how much detail that goes into.
A lot of time on it now.
I know.
Okay. well,
They're the
let's-
only committee actually that meets during the day. I don't know if that makes a difference. They happen to be a group who
Yeah.
can meet during the day instead of an evening meeting. So,
All right, well, I will make the motion to accept upon first reading the amended policy JK.
Second.
Any discussion or questions on this one? All in favor? Okay. JKAA is a pretty full, I think you can see, it's a legal, it's a pretty robust, striking the old legal language and putting the new legal language according to 603 CMR 46.02. Again, this is another kind of situation of, except I can see the typo, you got Brimfield in there instead of Sturbridge, darn. It's one of those cases of, we're following the law, and this is what the law is, and the law has changed a little bit, but when somebody gets mad or concerns about restraining in general, they're going to our policy book before they go into the law. Right.
So it's updating the law, and other than that one, Brimfield versus Sturbridge, I don't see any others. So I would suggest everything else being
As
the
is.
full replace as is.
Okay. All right, so I'll make the motion to accept upon first reading the amended JKAA, the updating of the school district there. Okay. Discussion or questions on JKAA?
I have a question. 1, 2, 3, 4, the fourth bullet down, superintendent will develop procedure identifying, descriptions of the school training and procedures to comply with reporting requirements, including but not limited to making reasonable efforts to orally notify a parent of the use of restraint within 24 hours of its imposition. Is that the law
We
within
have to-
24
we have
hours?
to- we have to,
Yes,
yeah.
should it be sooner?
Well, we do it sooner, but
Okay.
that's the limit. So we'll,
I'm just saying, if something happens to a child and they
Yeah.
come home and tell mommy,
Mhm.
I was pulled back, someone was hitting me, but I was defending
Mhm.
myself.
Yeah.
And they were restrained, and then we gave it 24 hours. The kid's telling the mom first.
yeah. But this is statute, so this is what
Okay.
we're required to, but we do it before end of business.
Okay, perfect.
Mhm. As long as it falls in, because what you're describing is not technically a restraint, but, yes.
Yeah.
One comment on fourth paragraph, it looks like the term was medication restraint, not medical restraint.
Medicinal.
So it's giving them medication.
Right, medication, not medical. It's
I
using
I
medical
believe that,
here.
yeah, I believe that no, she.
It says
A mechanical
we
restraint, a
should
medical
look at
restraint,
what
or
that is
seclusion.
in-
Yes.
I'll look it up and confirm, but I
I
think
think
that
that's
is
legal.
law, yep.
Yeah.
Right,
That
but
is
they call
exactly
it
from the law.
medical, so it's actually medicating a child.
No, I
I
understand.
know what you're saying, but it
I-
doesn't seem like it's grammatically correct.
No, but I looked up the law today,
Mhm.
and it said medication restraint.
Medication.
And then this isn't a policy question, but just a question for me. Not everyone is trained to do physical restraints,
No,
correct?
it's only, we use a very set, procedure, program, A&D,
Okay.
applied nonviolence is what we do. There is a core group of people that are trained every year. The initial training is a 3-day training, the annual training is a 1-day training. Pretty much all of our staff that work within the substantially separate programs are trained, as well as our support staff, so our psychologist, our adjustment counselor, some of our adjustment counselors, and other key identified staff. Mhm. I just for your information, we do not put hands on children. We have to file this has to go to DESI, we have to report out, and, I mean, last year we had one actual restraint of a school of well-rated kids with very unique programming embedded within it. We use de-escalation, we use all the A&D strategies before. Mhm.
Any other questions or comments on JKAA? Okay, all in favor of accepting upon first reading the amended JKAA
How's it?
as amended?
And JLC one is really just slightly changing the title to just call it wellness policy, because that's always what we're being asked to upload to the state, is the wellness policy. I think we have Sturbridge where it belongs and no Tantascwas, except where it does belong at the very, very end before someone thinks we need to change. Second page at the bottom, methods, that it is appropriate to refer to, it is a Tantascwa Union 61 Wellness Committee. So it's okay to have Tantascwa there, that's not referring to the Sturbridge specific procedures of the school here. So I think it's correct, I don't think we've changed a lot or anything there, we're just making sure we've got the right title, we've got the right committee, we've got the right school, and it's ready to be uploaded again.
So Deb, there's a couple really quick things. Under physical activities, and Kathy, I would think we'd put grades K through 6 on
That's
the
what I
daily
was, that's
reset.
what I had started.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Right there. And then under food and beverages, we do not have number 7, we have no vending machines.
And you anticipate you never will?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we should write that.
And my only other concern is methods for evaluating. We do make recommendations and we do evaluate every 3 years, but we do not do number 1, the pre and post assessment.
Now, I thought this came from all of you last June. Did you see this last May or June? The nurses as a group look at this, because I
We do
thought they
not.
did.
So we do this every 3 years, so that would be this year.
Yeah.
Assessments would be evaluated every 3 years to review policy compliance, but we have not done number 1.
Okay. We'll strike that one. And the vending machines in this building. Yep.
I have one question on page 2, under other school-based activities that promote student wellness, under number 2. So the second sentence there, some ideas include, like, that's not suggesting we have that, right? Cause do we have any walking clubs during and after school?
We don't have number 3, but we don't have pool, tracks.
Now, and again, I mean, you can detail this now, or you can leave something globally. I would argue you do have some walking clubs if you're doing jogathon activities, or
Oh,
you're
we
doing,
also have the
you have an
trail.
after-school
We have the trail, yep.
extended day thing, I wouldn't wanna, and as you're sitting here talking about what might come down the road in your field situation, I think it's a global policy, even if we don't have it, it's good to be there.
The other thing is we could just take out the examples. So in the first one, take out the some ideas include, but leave that first sentence. In the same, number 3, take out playgrounds, pool, tracks, just leave the main sentence. And Kathy, we don't have any school stores in number 1.
The book fair be
With food and
Yeah.
beverages,
Store though?
with food and beverages.
Yeah, we don't, for that purpose, we don't.
We can just cross that out.
No, no, and again, anything you cross off, you just need to make sure if you ever wanna start such activities, you bring it back, because there are others in the district that do have them.
What point, I'm sorry, what point was that on, that we were, where were we?
Dietary, other school-based
Second
activities,
page.
item number 1.
Is
So-
there anything in the after-school program, or do kids have their own stuff, or is there anything provided? I mean, I know in the, like when they've had field trip back in the day, when they
They
did,
don't sell anything.
We don't sell anything, yeah.
but if BD had a field trip or they did something, was there?
No. We're not doing field trips with the
What about like cookie walk, would that fall under
Well, that's the
fundraisers?
fundraiser.
Okay.
So you wanna strike school stores, do you, are you all in agreement, you want to strike the second sentence in number 2 with the examples?
Yeah, I think so.
Is everyone okay with that?
Because that changes all the time.
Yep.
Anyway.
Exactly, yeah, raise it a little bit.
So just make it more generic?
Yep.
And the same with 3, just make it
And the same
generic.
thing with 3, yeah, availability of.
pool?
Well, I don't know.
Hey,
Never mind.
you're just giving stuff away, you
I
know?
wouldn't mind. Come up with a way to get it, that would be awesome.
All right, any other call-outs on this one? Okay, so I think that, we'd like to make the motion to accept upon first reading the amended, and as amended, I mean the amendments, including the ones that we've
Yeah,
added here
yeah.
tonight, of JLC-1.
Second.
All in favor? All were in favor, Karen? ABBA,
This is redundant.
the hits keep coming.
We're almost, this is the last of the amendments, and then hopefully we're just rescinding things.
Yep.
KBBA, again, at the recommendation of legal and MASC, is there's apparently, honestly, I think they're getting rid of the numbers, because the law, if the numbering ever changes, then we're out of whack. They just say required by law.
Or the regulation?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. All right, I will start with making the motion to accept upon first reading the amended policy KBBA. Discussion on KBBA. None. All in favor? Thank you.
No, I lied, okay,
Oh,
sorry.
one more.
KHB, but I gotta tell you, I can't
What is
see,
HB?
I don't know. Jackie, did you see that online?
So this one I actually didn't find any existing policies.
You know what, this sounds familiar, I think it is a new.
If it
I
says
think the
first
same thing
reading.
happened in Brimfield, I think this one is actually a new.
Okay.
Which, you know, we do suggest, we've been avoiding the solicitation on school items for a very long time, so, I think having a policy saying that we don't advertise commercial products, and we managed to avoid it. Comes up every now and then from a fundraising point of view, but it is a slippery slope that
Yep.
we think we should continue avoiding. So if you would accept that on first reading as new, that would be great.
All right, I'll make the motion to accept upon first reading the new policy KHB.
I will second.
Is there any questions or discussion on this one?
So just wondering about like Scholastic Book Fair and like signage surrounding that, is that considered advertising?
It's advertising for the purposes of fundraising for the school, so I
Okay, so
I don't
don't
know,
have to
because
say
I
that.
actually have a question on this one as well,
I do too.
sorry. My question is actually, so we have oftentimes, okay, so the 5K is coming up, which I should have had in here, right? And my question would be, we get sponsors,
Right.
and we put their names on.
Mm-hmm.
Is that here, or is that actually, I don't know, I just,
Here- I'm gonna tell you what should be happening.
Mhm.
Things like that
Mhm.
should be in the PTO newsletter, so it is really the PTO who is accepting the advertising
Gotcha.
and the donations and not the school.
Okay.
Because the PTO gets to pick and choose who they accept advertisements from. School does not.
Gotcha.
You start taking one,
Right, it's a slippery
money
slope,
for
yeah.
one
Mhm.
particular company, you've got no right to say no to another one. And you can, we don't need to go in, but, there are inappropriate businesses and companies that you wanna say no to.
Yeah.
And do you want, the cigarette company to come along and say, hey, you took their money, take mine. So
Right.
we try to have even the newsletters, our PTO newsletters.
Mhm.
I always cringe a little bit, but then I say, no, PTO sends it out.
Mhm.
When there is, advertising and sponsorship for various the dance business, I'm like, I as a school don't wanna be looking like I'm endorsing
Right,
one
any one
dance
particular-
studio or over another one.
Right.
PTO can do that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, putting on my other hat of helping organize the Burgess Bear 5K, that's not a PTO sponsored event.
That's on your student activity list, is that what that is?
Yeah, so just
I mean,
wondering how we
it's
address that.
blurred a little bit, cause that's where it started, the roots of it actually started on PTO, with PTO. I mean, maybe we need to actually have it be sort of under the purview of PTO moving forward.
A PTO can do some of the fundraising and turn it over to the school to run the event.
It's a PTO
But doesn't
member.
this say, well, I mean, the way this is worded, the way
Yeah.
I read this is, it's saying no advertising of commercial products or services in school buildings, which I think that means
Yeah.
signage on
Mhm,
this
mhm.
facility, or on school grounds or properties.
Right.
So that also makes me think of signs being stuck in the ground or put on the building.
On the
and then it-
fences, we've had requests to.
On the fences.
do
and
Yeah, the
bells,
old,
yeah.
can I put a banner permanently
Right.
up there?
But it does say without prior approval of the school committee, so if we wanna be in that business of saying like often we do, it's to accept a
Yeah.
donation or something, we could also approve we can.
You
sponsor
could do it,
the
you
name
could
on the
do
s-
it.
Name on the shirts as well as
Gotcha.
we're accepting the
Mhm.
sponsorship or something like that.
Yeah, I think that sort of makes more sense to me versus trying to move the whole thing under PTO, because I
Because we
think
moved it
that's-
off of PTO many years
Yeah.
ago.
I
A lot
think it's
of
gonna
other
get
people-
tricky with like the
Mhm.
money
Yeah,
and the
no, I hear you.
donations,
And I-
and that everything's earmarked for the
Yeah.
sixth
Then
grade
At
activity
least this
fund.
controls it, like if
Mhm.
it's something that you just make in a, a request to the school committee.
offset the cost of very huge.
Mhm.
So if we're only accepting on First Street, so this wouldn't be policy for the
Correct.
upcoming, for this.
Right,
Right, not gonna violate
Right,
the policy.
right, yeah, no,
Feature.
it's fine,
Okay.
and again, you're accepting
That's fine.
donations in
Mhm.
exchange for what, putting
Right.
their name in a newsletter or on a
Well,
something?
there's a couple of different things that happen that we
Right.
we probably need to make certain that the community. is
Accepting
aware of.
donations is a little different than advertising,
Right,
and that's what, really what we're
Correct.
dealing with is advertising.
right.
Correct, I think we recognize them on social media.
We do.
Thank you for.
Yes,
yeah.
a thank you for your donation.
Yeah. Yeah,
And I think that they are on the shirts.
They
If
are on the
they-
shirts.
If they donate a certain
that'd be
amount of money.
advertising.
They're on the shirts. They're on the shirts.
Yeah.
all right, well, we, we can ask for some guidance, but this is just first reading.
Right.
Okay.
I just have, sorry, one more question. And I know we have a political policy. Does this include political advertisements?
This is specific to commercial.
It is,
Or
or is
products or services.
Okay.
Especially if you're talking about from like political campaign,
Yeah,
I think there's a
teachers
law that
wearing-
we cannot get involved in that. I think legally we cannot get involved in that.
teachers
There's a
wearing
law, I mean, in
candidate shirts
elections, you legally have to be
during
so far away,
Okay.
yeah.
No, I don't think in voting that there's any policy that says if the teacher couldn't wear, candidates, like advertise for a candidate.
Wait, I don't, like, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, then it would be probably
That would be the-
unprofessional, like it wouldn't, I don't know what the dress code for teachers is, but
Yeah.
I would think it would fall, with kids, we always say they can't wear things that are inappropriate.
Yeah, no, as long as
words
it's
or-
not distracting to the teaching in the classroom, it is generally a freedom of speech, as long as it's not disruptive.
Which is all in the
Which
eyes
is
of
not
the
you
beholder.
bet it is. Yeah,
I'm just-
you
some
bet it
blurred lines
is.
here.
We're not gonna have that conversation right now.
All right.
We'll be here till.
Did we get that one on the books?
So I think, I am going to make a motion to approve upon first reading the new policy, KHB.
Second.
And if there's no more discussion, I'll ask if we are all in favor of this.
Okay, and I'm gonna make life even easier and say we're not even gonna vote on the JICFB was noted here to rescind, but we amended it up top. The slight difference is it used to be, there's a different number. There's no reason to rescind what used to be called bullying versus bullying prevention. Bottom line is, you updated your JICFB. So we're just looking to rescind JBA, which we talked about a bit, JICFB1 that we talked about, JII, we did, and JKA and JLA, if you look at those, they are just either antiquated, unnecessary, or never belong, do not belong there.
Historical function.
Exactly.
You don't wanna keep that in there?
Right. So your call, I would suggest that you could rescind those all together in one vote.
Okay, all
Can
right.
you imagine?
No, I can't, but that's okay.
I'll make the motion to rescind upon first reading JBA, was it JICFB
one, yes.
JII, JKA, and JLA. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Thank you so much. I'm
Don't ever do
quite
this,
sure,
Lizzie.
I know. I'm sure next month they'll all be on second reading and there won't be any new ones. Because the task force hasn't, their committee hasn't started rolling yet, so.
And will we get clean or?
Yeah,
all
we'll,
the-
I'll have to figure out how to do the amendments so that you remember for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do these exact ones with one more version, so you can see what it was and what we changed. I'll take a look at them all.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, I know we'd all love to stay later, but that concludes tonight's
I
meeting.
know.
I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Alrighty, thank you much,
everyone.
folks.
Have a great night.
Have a nice weekend, holiday weekend.
You have-
I can't help